This is the case of the Forgetful Sheriff. Led by Mr. Scotty, the party of Eastern tourists rode the Texas Range. The hotel manager had promised them historic scenes of the old Wild West. Who knew what another mile might bring? Encyclopedia Brown knew. More blisters. He rode last in line. Behind him came the only chuck wagon with the food. Around noon, even the chuck wagon passed him. Encyclopedia didn't mind. It was lunchtime. Most of the tourists, including Encyclopedia, ate standing up. It made the boy detective mad to see his father sitting contentedly on the ground. "You don't look well, Leroy," he said. "I wish Bugs Meany were sitting in my place," said Encyclopedia. Chief Brown grinned. "I had the cowboy at the hotel give you the gentlest horse in the stable." "Then I must have the toughest saddle," answered Encyclopedia. "Say, Dad, do you think I made Mr. Scotty mad before?" "No, but you upset him when you figured out the truth about the gunfight between Ringo, Charlie, and Johnny Kidd," replied his father. "I'll try to keep still," vowed Encyclopedia. For the next half hour of riding, there was little else to do. The horses plodded across the flat grasslands. At last, Mr. Scotty called, "Dismount here, folks." The skinny little guide led the way to a pocket formed by 9 high rocks. "Now this here spot is called Outlaw Cemetery. It was so named on account of the 5 outlaws done in here 80 years ago," he began. "Them outlaws held up the bank at River Falls. They escaped with $12,000 in gold," said Mr. Scotty. "Sheriff Wiggins immediately set out after the desperados, but he was new on the job and forgetful. He forgot to put on his 6-gun. Mr. Scotty paused. He looked at the crowd of tourists to see if everyone was paying attention. He looked especially at Encyclopedia. Then he resumed his tale. One of the citizens of River Falls happened to enter the sheriff's office. He saw the sheriff's 6-gun still on the desk. Quickly, he spread the word. So a 6-gun means it's got 6 shots in it. I don't know if you know that. A posse of citizens was rounded up to ride out and help the unarmed lawmen capture the bank robbers. About 10 miles out of town, the posse heard gunplay. When the shooting stopped, the posse rode up to this here spot. Stretched out dead as fish in a barrel were them 5 outlaws. So the 5 outlaws died. Mr. Scotty began hopping about as he warmed to his tale. Sheriff Wiggins, he said, had recovered the stolen gold, but he was wounded in his left arm. In his modest way, he told the posse what had happened. He said the lookout for the outlaws saw him coming and shot 2 bullets into his left arm. Suddenly, Mr. Scotty clutched his left arm above the elbow. Then he made a leap and began to throw himself around. Sheriff Wiggins said he wrested the lookout's pearl-handled 6-gun away, despite his wounded left arm. Then he shot the lookout with his own gun. A bullet through the heart it was. At this point, Mr. Scotty dropped to one knee. Right away, the other 4 outlaws came at Sheriff Wiggins, shooting up a storm, he said. But the sheriff was cool as a hog on ice. He drilled them 4 desperados. Bang, 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 in 4 seconds flat. The skinny little guide jumped to his feet. He was breathing heavily with the effort of acting out the heroic sheriff's one-man stand against 5 outlaws. The outlaws were buried on Boot Hill, he continued. The stolen gold was returned to the bank at River Falls. Everybody in town claimed Sheriff Wiggins ought to run for president. Mr. Scotty dusted himself off carefully, letting the tourists wait for more of his story. Then he said, the town gave a dinner for the sheriff, though he said he didn't deserve the honor. Why, he was only doing his duty getting back the stolen gold, he said. But Mr. Baker, the bank president, disagreed. Again, Mr. Scotty broke off his tale to look at the tourists. He shot Encyclopedia a sly glance. It seemed to say, "Ready to solve this one, sonny?" Mr. Baker, concluded Mr. Scotty, said Sheriff Wiggins had done a mite more than his duty, and since this was the lawman's last meal, he'd better eat well. Then Mr. Baker said something that made the 3 biggest men at the dinner seize Sheriff Wiggins. Somebody got a rope, and at sunrise they hanged the lawman. The tourists gasped in amazement. After a brief silence, a lady from Vermont asked, "What did Mr. Baker say that made them hang the sheriff?" "Why, now that's the puzzle, isn't it?" replied Mr. Scotty. "I don't expect anybody in here could solve it. Could he?" The skinny little guy did not mention anyone by name, but the grown-ups on the tour turned and looked at Encyclopedia. Chief Brown looked at him too. Should I speak out, Dad? Asked Encyclopedia. If you know what Mr. Baker said that made the citizens hang Sheriff Wiggins, said his father. Encyclopedia took a step forward. Mr. Baker said... So how do you know that they hanged him? Or why did they hang him? Well, the reason why was Mr. Baker said you can't shoot 7 bullets from a 6 gun. All right, now remember we said a 6 gun can shoot 6 shots. Count them. Sheriff Wiggins claimed, remember he said he was wounded in the left arm by 2 shots. That's 2 bullets. Then he seized the lookout's gun and killed him with it. That's 3 bullets. And then they said he shot the remaining 4 outlaws. So then that would make 7 bullets, right? Because if he got shot in the arm twice, that's 2. And then he grabbed the gun from the lookout and shot him. So that was a 3rd one. And then the other 4 guys make 7. Encyclopedia reasoned, as had Mr. Baker, that the sheriff was secretly a member of the hold-up gang. In riding after his outlaw partners, the lawman didn't bother to put on his gun because he didn't think he'd need it. Then he had a falling out over the division of the loot, probably. Getting a hold of a gun, he surprised and killed all his partners. Before he could ride off with the gold, the posse reached him. So he had to make up the story about shooting the 5 outlaws in the line of duty. That was a very tricky one. I don't know if you were able to get it, but if you were, let me know. That was very tricky.